All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you guys for coming out. Appreciate that there's more than 2 people in the room. Definitely a bonus. My name is Jeremy Anderson. I'm here on behalf of Cambia Health Solutions. I'll give a little bit of Cambia first, tell you what our mission is, what the company looks like, tell you a little bit about myself. And then just to kind of set the stage for this presentation, I am a little bit ADD, and a lot of my security friends are a bit OCD, and so together we should have some FUN. This presentation is lacking in almost any text. It is a set of graphics to guide a story, a conversation, and I welcome interruptions. I thrive on interruptions, in fact, so if at any point in the presentation you will stop me, ask a question, I'm happy to have you do that. So Cambia is a little over 100-year-old company. I haven't been there that whole time, unfortunately. They started out a group of miners who pulled their money together to protect each other in the event of emergency, and from that it has evolved into healthcare IT solutions centered around giving the customer the best choices for their own healthcare. So Cambia itself is a nonprofit entity, incubates ideas on how to improve healthcare for the patient. Which is a really exciting opportunity for me, having come quite a bit of different market verticals. To finally be in healthcare is a great opportunity to do something that's meaningful and helpful for the people. So a little bit about myself before we move along. This is me, like I said, I'm not doing words. I've been a software developer for almost 20 years. So that's who I am. I still code today. I write Perl and Python and Java and C and C++ and PHP and you name it. I love to code. I love to get my hands dirty with code. If you look at my LinkedIn profile, my self-proclaimed title is Secure Code Monkey. So I still write code today. But I recently, within the last few years, transitioned into the security industry because I had a particular experience. I was working for one of the top 5 banks in the United States, and I managed a team that wrote customizations and code for a wholesale banking platform that processed $3 billion a month in check payments. A little bit of stress related to that, and of course, we didn't have a DR system when I came on board. That's a challenge, a little bit of risk. And we had 9 operation centers around the country running 24/7, utilizing this system to get their work done. And so this was about the time that a new CISO came on board. And right about the same time, PCI started to become a real big thing. All of the regulations related to how we handle payment card information and how you test and certify and audit came into bear. And so the information security team got a new tool. And they brought me their new tool and they said, we got a new tool, we scanned your system, and we found over 1,100 vulnerabilities. Here's 300 pages worth of documentation about those vulnerabilities, go fix it. And I said, okay, where do I start? What's the highest priority in here? He said, I don't know. You're the developer, you figure it out, you tell us what's most important. Well, that doesn't help. I don't know which is the highest risk, how to rank things. I didn't know anything about CVSS scores at the time, or what a CVE was, and so this was a bit of a challenge for me. I said, all right, well, we'll get started. If you don't know what the risk is, tell us how we can learn how to fix it, because obviously you wrote it wrong the first time. What do we do now? I don't know, you guys are developers, figure it out. Well, it wasn't helpful either. So I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to put all of these flaws into our product backlog, and we're going to start working on it. We'll get to it. We got another release coming up, and I think 6 or 9 months and a couple quarters along, and we'll rock this out. And they said, nope, you have 30 days to resolve these defects, or you end up on a report that goes directly to our CEO. Anybody want to imagine how I felt? Anybody else ever been in a circumstance like that? So I'm here, an ambassador to the information security group. I'm now this guy. I went back to my bat cage, I put on my mask, and I said, you know what, I'm going to make sure we don't do this again. Developers want to help, in case you're not aware of it. How many of you think that within your companies that developers are responsible for creating value for your customers? Absolutely. Absolutely. And yet, developers see themselves as with security as a roadblock to getting that job done. That's a challenge, right? So security to developers kind of looks like this guy. You know, Lord of the Rings fans out there? Ever seen this movie? Excellent, excellent. So this is Gandalf in Lord of the Rings at a very crucial moment. He's standing on a bridge protecting the rest of his team from the Balrog. It's a giant monster. In this case, that monster is a software developer who's trying to get his code out the door. And this is in many cases how we end up in the circumstances. So the developer's Balrog, and if the developers are the ones responsible for generating revenue, and they're trying to get work out the door, and they don't know how to fix it, and they don't know what's the highest priority, what we have is a huge disconnect, right? So that's the disconnect that I found myself in, and it's why I went and dove headlong into InfoSec. I am now a holder of CSSLP. If you don't know what that is, it's an ISC squared cert, Certified Software Security Lifecycle Professional. I believe there need to be more of those. If you have developers that have any interest in security, encourage them to seek out the training and cert for that certification. It was very helpful for me. I was able to rely a lot on the training I already had, knowledge I had from the industry, but I also learned a lot in the process of getting that certification. So highly recommended. So in healthcare, what we're looking to do primarily is protect our organization from doing the wrong thing with the data that we have and harming our customers or our business in some way, especially related to PHI and HIPAA audit risk. And so this is, in a nutshell, what HIPAA says that we have to do. And this is we have to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of all PHI that we create, receive, maintain, transmit, and identify and protect against any reasonably anticipated threats to the security or integrity of the information, and protect against reasonably anticipated impermissible uses or disclosure, and ensure compliance by our workforce. So everybody needs to know how PHI works, everybody needs to get certified. And I think that sometimes where we get stuck is with these words, reasonably anticipated. I've done some looking, I haven't quite found anyone who completely agrees consistently on what this means, so we end up in this scenario, right? I don't think that means what you think it means. And so as we go along, we end up trying to solve the problem of what reasonably anticipated means, and we think that we're doing this, right? We've got everything has to be perfect. We're launching this to the moon, and we have to be sure that we don't ever even come close. And if there's any question of whether we might even be close to violating a rule of HIPAA, then we take 2 steps the other direction to make sure that we're on the right side of the line, which is, I think, a good mindset to have. But sometimes I think our fear of doing the wrong thing or not doing enough, doing no thing, and our fear of getting fired. I mean, it's amazing how many times you hear CISOs talk about, you know, the next time they're going to get fired, or, you know, if I can just survive the week and not get fired. You know, I think a lot of times, unfortunately, that's what drives our mind, instead of doing what we can to make the business better, more secure, and generate more revenue. So back to that reasonably anticipated phrase. You know, when you talk to developers about reasonably anticipated, they might be a little bit further in another direction. They kind of, you know, we'll definitely put systems and plans and process in place, but really they think we're kind of doing something a little bit more along the lines of this. You know, either you're selling some lemonade, or maybe you're Lucy and the psychiatrist is in sign, or something like that. But really, we're probably not launching astronauts to the moon in most cases. We certainly do have data classification standards for level 5 data that if somebody's going to lose their life if this gets exposed or we have a breach in this area. In my cases, I don't think I've ever touched anything in any program in my company related to that. I think those of you who touch medical devices and things, you're probably in that area. But definitely I think having a consideration for what it looks like to really be mindful of what it is that you're trying to do and what reasonable anticipation looks like is helpful. So obviously it's a bit of a gross oversimplification meant to illustrate that there's a lot more going on here than a set of hard and fast rules, and that our goal in this case, because I'm not a Balrog, clearly, and everyone in the InfoSec community is not Gandalf trying to keep me from doing harm. So our goal in this case is really partnership. So if this AppSec 0 to Hero case study of what I've been doing for the last bit when I started at Cambia, I've been there a little bit over a little half a year, about half a year now, and looking to really launch an AppSec program and have gone through POCs, evaluated vendors, tested with developers, and already in the process of bringing on those tools and ramping up as we get started. And so all the way along, my effort has been to sell partnership, to sell collaboration. And so if you're a note taker, I'm going to give you a 3-word alliteration at the end that can be the culmination of this whole talk. We'll get to that point, and we'll wrap it up with a nice bow. So this is kind of what's going on, I think. What do you see here? Anybody want to just comment on what this looks like? What's that? It's a shortcut, right. So somebody designed this little park area, and they defined the boundaries of the walkway to be such and such, the boundaries of the green space and the parking lot to be where they were, and the users did what? They went their own way, right? They did things their own path. How many of you have developers in your organization who operate like those people? Absolutely. Both hands up. So what do we do in the information security as practitioners? What do we do to fix that?
Put up barriers.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't you walk on my grass, right? And so this is, then of course they find a way to cut through it or jump over it or go around it or what have you. But this is more, when we have those scenarios, it's more indicative of a problem of understanding and collaboration that's failing, right? There's something else breaking down. What could we have solved how could we have solved that before we implemented? Well, I want to go that way. Okay, well, let's build a pathway to go that way. And this is what I need to do to get my job done. At Cambia, we are 100% all in on cloud going forward. We are very much invested in the mindset of doing DevOps. And so for every single one of my development teams, my question to myself is not, how can I slow you down? It's how can I keep you going at DevOps speed, but make sure that security is built in. So this presentation could just as easily been titled, a culture of DevSecOps, right? It's how we can integrate security into the process, keep developers moving and delivering things quickly. And so if you've ever done software development, you've probably seen this picture. This is how the customer explained it, how the project leader understood it, how the analyst designed it, and so forth. What the customer really needed is very different than all of those pictures. And so this is kind of indicative of what the process of developing software that we've seen to date. This waterfall model in most cases has been, let's write really good definitions up front. and not move from those definitions. And we're going to set a target date. We're going to deliver, and that's just the way we get done. DevOps looks a lot different than that. So the waterfall model, if you will, is kind of like we're going to do design, and we're going to design this car, everything down to the detail before we start production. And once we start production, you're not making any changes because these things are rolling off the assembly line, right? Well, it doesn't really work for software, as we've come to learn, because changes are required to happen a lot more frequently. But what we find out is that security is still operating in many cases under the model and under the assumption that we're still doing work this way. Requirements coming in one end, and they're progressing out through the process of the life cycle, and the software is being delivered on the other end. We can test it. There's plenty of time built in for that. We can assure that this thing will be secure before it goes out the door. And the developers are now saying, nope, I'm going to come up with an idea in the morning from my story backlog, and we're going to define it and build it that day and deliver the very next into test. And it needs to be a problem at the end of the week, right? In many cases, I don't know if you've seen recent statistics, but Amazon themselves, they deliver over 30 times a day to production. So if you go to Amazon.com, what you see now may be a slightly different version of their site than you saw half an hour ago. Okay? So this is the direction that we're heading. And so what we're finding is that software development looks a lot more like this these days. This is a street art collaboration between a number of artists, and each one kind of has a bit of the thing that they're working on, but they're all kind of watching the picture of the whole and creating together. Where's security in here? Anybody see some security? Anyone?
That dude at the bottom?
Sure.
Just like he's 10?
Yeah.
Back.
We've got a tarp down here on the ground, right? That's a constraint. We've protected the grass. We've got each person working in their own area, perhaps tying things off, measuring out the sections that you're okay to work in. So maybe we're containerized in some cases, or maybe we've got a conversation going between these guys. What does your workflow look like? What does your process look like? How are you going to get it out? So the software today is built in a more collaborative model, and it's very quick, it's iterative, and it's constantly evolving. This is where, if we're going to be successful as security practitioners in solving this problem, if you've seen the 2016 Verizon breach report, the #1 attack vector is web applications, all the way. And if web applications are going to be deployed in a every moment by moment model, we have to be able to test and certify and analyze the risk for all of these changes on a very continuous basis. So some of these ideas that I've learned in my time at Cambia, and as I've begun to describe and implement and discover these models with other practitioners, have come from the Phoenix Project. If you haven't read the Phoenix Project, I highly recommend it. It's more like a model or a mantra, for, if you will, of how to do security and DevOps and business in a very fast-moving model. And I got a great illustration for what this should look like, for what the ideal picture for this should look like in our business. And it came from my CISO, and he's in the room, so thank you, Steve, for this picture. But really what it looks like is you are going to do a drive across country. Okay? And in the typical business fashion, security says, okay, you want to go from point A to point B. Here's a map. Here's our expectations for how you get there and what you have to do along the way. What are some of the challenges that you face? You're going to have to overcome those. But here's our set of expectations. So you're kind of sitting in the map, and this is old school. So there's not really a great way to do communications along the way. You have to pull over, or maybe whip out a payphone and call back in. I'm lost. Am I going the right direction? Oh, no, you're lost. You should have been over here. You now lost time, right? This is obviously no way to continue doing software. So software and security working together looks a lot more like this. Everybody know what this is? Rallycross. It's where you get a race car and you drive across the desert at bad out speeds and do your best to be first. But in this and this is what DevSecOps looks like, right? This is a picture for DevSecOps. And in this case, security is with you. We're there to give you turn-by-turn directions ahead of time. We're going to plot the course. We're going to punch those waypoints into your GPS. We're going to make sure that you know at every curve how fast to be going, when to deliver brake, when to deliver power, and we're going to keep you moving. We know that you want to win, and we all win when you win, right? We're your pit crew, and if you don't win, we don't win. We're also going to train your co-driver, and it can be I've implemented a program called Security Champions Program. And so what I've done is I've been going around to all of the development teams and saying, I need you to give me your best and your brightest for 4 hours a month. Okay? And it's in many cases, you'll know the person that I want because he's the one that everybody goes to when they have a problem. They want to know how to figure something out, or she's the one who can tell you how to optimize a database query better than anyone, right? So give me the person that is already acting in a mentorship role for your team, and let them spend some time with me every month. And then what we do is once a month we get together as security champions, and I do one part paranoia. So we run through an actual attack scenario. I'm also a penetration tester, or at least aspiring penetration tester. So we'll run through an attack scenario, show them what SQL injection looked like. I'll show them what a cross-site scripting or vulnerability, how that would actually be attacked and executed, how I can get data back, how I can footprint their sites, and so forth. So we train their co-driver in order to make sure that they have someone with them who also is part of the security team, always. And then we're also constantly monitoring progress, right? So we've got a radio communication. We're watching the GPS as they move along. We're going to radio in if we notice that they're off. And what that looks like is your analytics based into security testing platform. If you don't have automated systems today, that's your next stop on the journey. We talked about automation in a security earlier, I believe yesterday, and that SaaS scenario was exactly on point. Find a solution that works for you and your business, that costs the best, but make sure it's something you can automate, build into the platform, and in my case, my preference is make sure the developers never have to touch it. It should happen behind the scenes, either nightly on their code base or based on when they do deployments. And I've got a picture of that that'll come up next. And then also we're available on the radio to help. Constantly checking in with those security champions, making sure that they have the tools that they need, asking them for feedback on what's working, what's not working, and ensuring that they're moving along. And then we also tune the car regularly and adjust as needed. So these are all the things that you do in a race to keep moving. And these are all the things that you have to do in a mature AppSec program to keep moving. So if something's not working, make adjustments. Make sure that the policy that we create isn't all 1,100 defects need to be fixed by tomorrow. Nope, let's take the top critical vulnerabilities sorted by C of 8 CVSS score, and criticals and high vulnerabilities I expect to be resolved in 7 days. There's no way you can go longer than that. You put our business at major risk if you do, because the exploitability likelihood is very high and the risk to the business is very high, right? But then we go down to the other end of the spectrum where it's informational. Maybe we have some information leakage, like the header is telling the world that we're using Apache 2. Well, that is a challenge because it gives the attackers information they shouldn't have, but it's not instantly exploitable. They're going to have to work a whole lot more for other things. So those kinds of vulnerabilities I expect you to resolve in 30, 60, or 90 days or something like that. So be sure that you have a spectrum of expectations and define that policy well. What's the goal? Win. How do we want to do it? We want to do it. We got to drive faster, right? We got to keep moving. So this is what this looks like at Cambia. This is what we're building and implementing now. We have security department defining and implementing new users, defining the roles, and setting up applications in our systems so that those platforms can be tested consistently. We're also integrating our development environments and our automation tools, baking in those static, dynamic, and third-party analysis testing tools into our GitLab repo to scan them regularly, and then also deploy dynamic scanning based on when they deploy to tests. Any defects that don't meet policy go out to JIRA and get a ticket open and go back through based on that SLA and policy to be worked. And so this is a way that we keep things moving consistently and developers are then able to take action as they need it. So as I mentioned before, really the key to this for me is those champions. Look for folks in your organization. We made this a prestigious opportunity. It's by invite only. You have to be accepted in. We provide training, so they get trained on our dime in our budget line item, but they work on our team and we keep moving fast. To close up, I've got just a couple minutes left. Let me tell you the story about Rock Soup. Anybody know the story of Rock Soup? So the story of Rock Soup goes like this. You've got the reclusive wizard comes into town during a huge famine. The town is starving. And he comes into the middle of the center of town, and he sets up a big pot, and he puts fire under it and gets it boiling, and it's empty. And he takes a big rock, and he throws a rock in the soup, and the town people come out. What are you doing? I'm making rock soup. You guys are hungry, aren't you? Let's make some rock soup. What do you mean rock soup? You can't eat rocks. He says, well, I'm telling you, rock soup can feed this whole town. So he says, this rock soup's pretty good, takes a taste of it. If I only had a carrot. The guy nearby says, well, I got a couple of carrots left over. So I'll throw them into the rock soup. Oh, great. Chops up the carrots. If the carrot's gone, takes a taste. This is really good. If we could throw some other vegetables, maybe some celery or broccoli in here. One other person has some celery, some leeks, some broccoli. Everybody contributes each of those pieces. We start to build this soup. Man, it's good. I can use some protein though. Man, if we had a chicken. One person happens to have a scrawny little chicken left over, but they throw that chicken in, and at the end of the time, the whole town's out there. They now have a huge pot of soup able to feed everybody. The moral of the story is this is a collaborative effort. Everybody has to win. Security can't be a roadblock. Development can't be going around your controls and policies, but you have to make sure that you are developing champions and relationships. I love they talked about the tribes of CISOs earlier, if you were in that talk, because this is the top maturity model of a CISO. It's where you are engaged and are developing those relationships tightly with the organization, keep everybody moving forward with one goal. And finally, that three-word alliteration, I told you I'd give you one. The first one's education. It's those security champions. Make sure that folks in your organization get trained not just on security awareness, but on developing secure code. I don't know about you, your developers, but when I went to school, they never taught a single thing about software security. Every developer I've met has said the same thing. Security isn't taught in university. The next thing is automation. If you can automate it, automate it. That's the way to keep moving and go fast. And since I like alliterations, but I also like acronyms, and I thought it went well with SOUP, instead of using collaboration, I used teamwork. So it's a teamwork, it's a joint effort. Everybody needs to be on board. Thanks a lot. I know I hit the top. Looks like we're just about at the top of the hour, but any questions while we wrap up? Or transition? Yes.
What are the pushbacks of your experience in the organization?
Say it again.
What are the pushbacks of your experience in?
What are the bootstraps?
Pushbacks.
What are the pushbacks of the organization? From the developers primarily, it's we don't have time. That's always the way it's got to be. And so the pushback on that is a give and take. I'll tell developers, I understand you don't have time. I'm on your side. I've been delivering software my whole life. I get it. You got more features to deliver, right? And that's why I think the common sense policy of fix first, tell them what's most critical, and say you have to fix most critical, but you're going to do it now. But I will work with you on the rest. And if you don't know how to resolve something, I'm going to show you how to resolve it. So find those either within your organization, find somebody who's an expert in writing secure code. And if you can't find an expert in writing secure code in your company, you can absolutely find a service organization that does you for that. In many cases, it can be the same company that provides your static and dynamic analysis testing. Several of the larger Magic Quadrant leaders in that space, also as a service of their offering, will provide mitigation consulting for you, so that you can train your developers by leveraging their resources. And that's how, as a one-man band, I'm building and ramping up this program, planning primarily to leverage those third parties. Good question. Yes?
You mentioned you get a commitment for 4 hours from your security champions from different teams.
Right.
How much outside of that do they end up spending on security activities supporting their teams?
So that's a good question. The question was how much more time besides the 4 hours do they use supporting security activities? Really it's kind of it's probably a bit of ad hoc work that I don't think we measure yet. So it's the same sort of work that those champions would do anyway. So it's like, how do I optimize this query? Probably aren't tracking that either, right? So if a junior developer comes to them and said, they told me I'm vulnerable to SQL injection in this field, I don't know what they mean. Show me how to do this right. In many cases, it's as easy as this developer, the senior developer, saying, well, actually, if you just use the secure encode function that exists in the package you're using around that variable, you're going to solve the problem. And in many cases, it's as simple as that, right? So it's just small information that people just don't know, haven't learned. And what you'll find over time is that the occurrence of those of new defects falls as they start to learn. But really, the only way to get that to happen is you got to have embedded knowledge. You got to be able to have that training happen.
Do you let them then operate things like static code analysis for that team, or is that a centralized function?
So it's a centralized function, and reports are returned automatically once the scan completes. So scan is automatically kicked off in the repository. They also have access to the tools at the desktop if they want it. But in many cases, it's not needed, rather just keeping them busy doing writing new code. Yeah. Great questions. Thank you. Anyone else?
I've got a question.
Yes.
What languages are you working in?
So because we incubate new companies, and those new companies often can choose their own stack, we have a total hodgepodge. And because of that, our requirements have to support a wide variety of languages, and that's everything from Ruby, Node.js, React Native, which is mostly JavaScript as well. We still have tons of legacy Java and .NET apps. We're not supporting any of the latest and greatest crazy stuff like Go or Scala or anything like that. But Ruby and Node, I think, are the primary, and that was a big one that drove our decision. I think I'm totally out of time and going to get kicked out. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate being here.